Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. Back in my first year of college in 2023, I used to live in a residence on campus with 3 other guys. 2 of them were cool, shout out to Marcus and Javi, but the third named Tyler had a nasty habit of taking things that weren't his and mysteriously forgetting that the objects had fallen into his possession. The items he had stolen and were subsequently found in his room included food, snacks, notebooks, wireless earbuds, and even my portable charger. We'd all complained to our RA, but since they were such small items, we were told that we should just have a house meeting and talk about it with Tyler to resolve the problem. "Look guys, I think you're overreacting," Tyler said during our second house meeting. "It all looks so similar. How am I supposed to know which is mine? Maybe because we keep our stuff in our own rooms?" Marcus replied, clearly annoyed. Considering that we all kept our belongings in our rooms, this was obviously bullcrap, but the RA, residence assistant, said unless it was something major, campus security wouldn't launch an official investigation. "We need a system," Javi suggested, "something to mark our stuff." So we instituted a masking tape policy and marked everything, but lo and behold, Tyler still continued his petty theft. "Dude, how did my headphones end up in your drawer?" I confronted him one day. "Oh, those are yours? I thought they were mine," he replied with a shrug. "The tape must have fallen off." Knowing nothing would happen unless I took action, I planned my revenge. I shelled out around $100 for something similar to this bad boy. It was a USB device that once plugged into an unsecured USB port, fried the computer by building a charge and dispersing it into the port, pretty much destroying the CPU among other parts. Now obviously I wasn't going to plant this anywhere, but I had to make it seem like this was a tool and not some sort of setup. So I'd roped Marcus and Javi in on my plan and installed this software called Device Lock, which protects USB ports from being used without express permission from the user on all of our devices, also just in case the a-hole tried to plug it into our laptops. I even went as far as taping my name to this silicon time bomb. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, looking nervous. "Seems pretty extreme." "Trust me," I replied. "I'm not going to plant it anywhere, but if he takes it from my room, that's on him." With them roped in, the last thing to do was wait and see if Tyler had learned his lesson. It took all of 3 days, but expectedly Tyler did not learn his lesson. I was at the library when this happened, but Tyler had decided that this sexy USB would be the perfect addition to his collection of stolen wares, so he went into my room and took it. Big mistake. I got a text from Marcus that read, "Dude, get back here ASAP, Tyler is losing it." I hightailed it, and when I got near our residence, I could physically hear Tyler swearing and yelling from the hallway. "What the duck? What the actual duck?" he was screaming when I walked in. When I got inside, he was cussing and screaming that he was going to sue me for purposely trying to damage his laptop by booby-trapping a USB. "You did this on purpose!" he yelled, pointing at his smoking laptop. "You knew I would use it!" Admittedly, I should have held my composure better, but I laughed in that mofo's face. "How exactly did you get that USB?" I asked calmly. "Because it was clearly labeled with my name on my desk in my room." "That doesn't matter. You can't just leave stuff around that destroys property," Tyler shouted. "I wasn't leaving it around. I was using it to test whether my computer ports were secured from devices such as this, in my own room, behind my closed door." Screaming ensued from him, after which our RA showed up, heard that crap fest from down the hall, and asked what the hell was happening. "What's going on here?" the RA demanded, looking between us. I stayed quiet to let Tyler attempt to lie his way out of this, but holy duck, the dumb crap kept to his story. "He planted a USB that fried my laptop. I need that for exams. He did it on purpose because he knew I would use it," Tyler ranted. "Use it? How would you use it if it was in his room?" the RA asked, immediately seeing the problem. After explaining my side, the RA said we are both going to campus security as this was pretty serious, cue me thinking I just ducked up my whole future for a stupid act of revenge. When we got there and explained our stories, campus security had none of Tyler's crap. "Let me get this straight," the security officer said to Tyler. "You entered his room without permission, took something clearly labeled with his name, plugged it into your computer without authorization, and now you're claiming he's at fault?" They told him that one. "He cannot sue me since this was not a trap, but a security tool that was within my own living space, of which he had no right entering to steal from and to. He was being relocated to the old single residences on the other side of campus, and if they caught wind of this again, he was getting banned for life from res, as well as receiving a non-academic offense. A nice little chat with the dean about his misconduct. His tone immediately flipped to crying and saying he had all his exam notes on there. It was stress that was causing him to do this, and he had paid to live in the nicer dormitory-style housing, but they basically told him, "Tough crap, this is your one and final warning." "But my midterms are next week," he pleaded. "I can't afford a new laptop right now." "Perhaps you should have thought of that before entering someone else's room and taking their property," the officer replied coldly. The three of us enjoyed the rest of the semester with an extra bedroom for storage space and beer pong, which was definitely a win. "Best revenge ever," Javi said one night as we were celebrating in the now empty room. "To the USB that saved us from a thief," Marcus toasted, raising his cup. As for Tyler, I've only ever seen him in the cafeteria or library on occasion, sitting there studying, without his laptop. The next one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd become one of those property owners who has to deal with entitled people, but here we are. Last month, I had an encounter that still makes me shake my head in disbelief. For some background, I own a decent-sized piece of rural property about 30 minutes outside of town. It's nothing fancy, just 40 acres of mixed woodland and clearings that I bought a few years back as an investment and weekend retreat. The property has been in my family for generations, and I finally managed to buy it back from distant relatives who had inherited it but never used it. The land sits at the end of a winding dirt road, and while there are a few other properties nearby, mine is the most secluded. I've got it properly posted with no trespassing signs every 100 feet or so along the perimeter, and there's a large sign right at the entrance gate that clearly states private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. You literally cannot miss these signs if you have functioning eyeballs. I use the property mainly for hunting, fishing in the small pond, and just getting away from the chaos of city life. There's an old cabin on the property that I've been slowly renovating, and I spend most weekends out there working on it or just enjoying the peace and quiet. The trouble started on what should have been a perfectly normal Saturday morning. I had driven out early to do some work on the cabin's roof before it got too hot. As I was unloading my truck, I heard voices coming from the direction of my pond, which sits about a quarter-mile back into the property. This immediately set off alarm bells because the pond isn't visible from any public road, and you have to walk a good distance past multiple no trespassing signs to reach it. I grabbed my binoculars and could see a group of people, looked like a family with kids, setting up what appeared to be a picnic right by my pond. I was annoyed, but figured I'd handle it diplomatically. These things happen sometimes when people don't realize they're on private property, even though the signs are pretty clear. I walked over to politely let them know they were trespassing and ask them to leave. As I approached, I could see it was a woman with 2 young kids and what looked like her elderly mother. They had spread out blankets, unpacked a cooler, and the kids were already waiting in the shallow end of the pond. The woman looked to be in her 40s with that particular haircut and attitude that immediately screams trouble. I walked up with my hands visible and a friendly smile, not wanting to seem threatening. Before I could even open my mouth, this woman, let's call her Karen because that's exactly what she was, started laying into me. She demanded to know what I was doing sneaking around and accused me of being some kind of predator for watching them through binoculars. When I tried to explain that this was private property and they needed to leave, she cut me off and informed me that this was public land and I had no right to harass a family trying to enjoy nature. I stayed calm and pointed out the no trespassing signs that were clearly visible from where we stood. Karen's response was to tell me that those signs were probably fake and that I was just trying to scare people away from public property. She then announced that she was calling the police to report me for harassment and intimidation. Here's where it gets interesting. I told her she was absolutely welcome to call the police, and in fact I encouraged her to do so. This seemed to confuse her for a moment, but she quickly recovered and pulled out her phone. While she was on the phone with dispatch, I walked back to my truck and got my folder of property documents. I always keep copies in the glove compartment because you never know when you'll need to prove ownership. I also grabbed my own phone and called the non-emergency line to report trespassers on my property. Karen finished her call and smugly informed me that the police were on their way to deal with my harassment. She then made what turned out to be a critical mistake. She declared that since this was public land, she had every right to be here, and she was ordering me to leave immediately, or she would add failure to leave public property when ordered by a citizen to her complaint against me. This is where the malicious compliance kicks in. I looked at this woman who was illegally on my property, telling me, the actual owner, to leave my own land, and I realized I had a golden opportunity. I smiled and told her that I would absolutely respect her wishes and leave the property immediately. I explained that since she had ordered me to leave and was calling the police anyway, I would drive to the main road and wait for the officers there. I would let them sort everything out. Karen seemed pleased with this victory and told me that was the smart thing to do. She then settled back onto her blanket with a satisfied expression while her kids continued playing in my pond. Here's what Karen didn't understand about rural police response times and property law. First, it was going to take the police at least 20 minutes to get out to this location. Second, by ordering me to leave public property, she had just taken full responsibility for everything that happened on the land during my absence. I drove to the end of the dirt road and parked where I could see any police cars arriving. While I waited, I took photos of Karen's vehicle license plate and called my insurance company to report potential liability issues on my property. I also called my lawyer, just to give him a heads up about the situation. About 25 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. I flagged him down and explained the situation. He looked at my property documents, confirmed my identity, and I could see his expression change from neutral to very interested when I told him about Karen ordering me to leave my own property. The deputy followed me back to the pond where Karen and her family were still enjoying their unauthorized picnic. When Karen saw us approaching, she immediately started talking before the deputy could say a word. She launched into a lengthy complaint about how I had been harassing them and trying to intimidate them into leaving public property. The deputy let her finish, then asked to see her identification. He also asked if she had permission to be on this property. Karen confidently stated that she didn't need permission because it was public land. That's when the deputy informed her that she was on private property and needed to gather her belongings and leave immediately. The look on Karen's face was priceless, complete shock and disbelief. She started arguing with the deputy, insisting that I was lying and the signs were fake. The deputy showed her my property deed and explained that all the no trespassing signs were legally posted, but here's where it got even better. The deputy then informed Karen that by ordering me to leave my own property, she had essentially claimed responsibility for it, and during the time I was gone, her children had been unsupervised on dangerous property with a pond. Since she had ordered the property owner to leave, she could potentially be charged not just with trespassing, but with reckless endangerment for allowing children to swim unsupervised in a private pond without the owner's knowledge or consent. The deputy explained that if anything had happened to those kids while I was gone at her insistence, she would have been fully liable. Karen's attitude changed completely at this point. She started backpedaling, saying she didn't know it was private property and that she hadn't meant for me to actually leave. But it was too late. The deputy had already started writing citations. The deputy issued trespassing citations to Karen and her mother and warned them that the property owner, me, could press additional charges if I chose to. He also informed Karen that her decision to order me off my own property while allowing her children to engage in potentially dangerous activities could result in child endangerment charges if I decided to pursue it. As they were packing up their stuff, Karen tried one last desperate move. She asked if she could just apologize and if we could work something out. I looked at this woman who had spent the last hour calling me a liar, a predator, and a fake, who had ordered me off my own property, and who had threatened to have me arrested for the crime of asking trespassers to leave. I told her that she had made it very clear that she wanted the police to handle this situation, and that I was simply respecting her wishes by letting the legal process run its course. After all, she had ordered me to leave so the police could sort it out, and that's exactly what had happened. The deputy escorted Karen and her family off the property, and I never saw them again. I did hear through the local grapevine that Karen tried to fight the trespassing citation in court, claiming she didn't know it was private property. Apparently, the judge was not sympathetic, especially when the prosecutor showed photos of all the no trespassing signs she would have had to walk past to reach the pond. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the best way to deal with entitled people is to give them exactly what they ask for. Karen wanted me gone so the police could handle everything, and that's precisely what she got. She just didn't anticipate that handling everything would include her getting cited for trespassing and potentially facing more serious charges. I still use the property regularly, and I've never had another trespassing incident quite like that one. I did add a few more signs and installed a gate with a lock, just to make things even clearer. But honestly, the look on Karen's face when she realized she had been wrong about everything was worth all the hassle. The best part is that her own words and actions created the entire situation. If she had simply apologized when I first approached and left quietly, none of this would have happened. Instead, she chose to double down on being wrong, call the police, and order me off my own property. Sometimes people really are their own worst enemy. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was listening to RS today and I remembered this story. This isn't my petty revenge, but I was witness to it. As you all know, a lot of 2020 graduates got screwed over when it came to, graduating. To lift our spirits, Krispy Kreme decided that, on National Donut Day, every 2020 graduate who could prove they were a graduate with a cap and gown, grad merch, a diploma, ECT, would get a free dozen donuts. There is one Krispy Kreme in my town. Additionally, you should not underestimate the will of teenagers, young adults, and their desperation for free donuts because, my God, there were cars in droves wrapping around the Krispy Kreme and into the road for free donuts. Now, I need to describe the Krispy Kreme in order for this to make sense. They're a tiny building and there's two entrances, one closer to the drive-thru, one to the parking lot. Due to the overwhelming amount of customers, people were entering and getting in line through the parking lot entrance and wrapping around in a zigzaggy-like line around the parked cars. My sister and I were weighed in like good noodles, but as we inched closer to the front, this Karen-esque obese woman in a muted orange Jeep rolled up beside us through the drive-thru entrance. We laughed. No way was anyone gonna let her in because, like I said, young broke adults and free donuts. Plus, some of us have been waiting there for over an hour, so if Karen here thought us ravenous children were gonna just let her scooch on in, she was sorely mistaken. Well, Karen didn't stop trying to merge in. And what you've yet to know, readers, is that my sister takes no bullcrap from the people who think they can just ram little cars over and get their way. So she floored it and got on the ass of the car in front of us, glaring at Karen. Karen is screaming at us, blowing on her horn and inching closer and closer. Insert WTF look. Suddenly, Karen floored it and screeched towards the passenger door where I was sitting, slamming on the brake just as her car was about to hit us. Both of us, and probably a lot of other people, screamed, "What the duck?" But she continued to lay on her horn, claiming we cut her off. I decided we should not engage in crazy and ignored her. My sister, however, is not like me. She was boiling that this woman almost hit us. Karen had merged in behind us because I guess the car behind us didn't want to be almost hit like we were, and Karen refused to back up, so she rolled down the windows. I'm like, "B, don't do anything stupid, she'll rear-end us." And B said, "Let her, she can pay for it then." Karen wanted to order special donuts, apparently, and was being stupidly specific with each one, or at least that's what little I heard over my sister's petty revenge. B had pulled up a playlist of graduation music, you know, the type they play as you walk across the stage to freedom or to a 9-5, and watching in her rear mirror every time Karen opened her mouth, she cranked the radio as loud as it would go, drowning her out. Karen would lay on her horn demanding we shut up. B would turn it down. Karen would start to order again. B would turn it back up. I was laughing hysterically for the few minutes it lasted, and B was grinning until I said, "Listen, B, the people behind us want their donuts." Reluctantly, B gave in and rounded the corner to get out donuts. We could hear Karen screaming her order and how they better get them right. As we pulled up, they asked for proof, and the girl said, "1 dozen donuts, gotcha," and ducked back inside. We waited. Karen rolled in behind us. A different worker appeared at the window. She leaned out. "Did you get helped?" she had asked. "Yeah," I answered. "We did. We're just waiting." The worker glanced out of the corner of her eye at the orange Jeep. She looked at us, then back at Karen. Karen blew on her horn again, likely demanding we hurry up. It was like a light bulb flashed, and a grin spread across her face. "Here you are!" she exclaimed, passing 2 boxes of donuts through the window. "Enjoy and congratulations!" My sister and I were too stunned to say anything, assuming she saw the two of us and presumed we were both grads. So we took our donuts and left, laughing at our good fortune. Wanting to eat a donut, I popped open the top box and gasped. A special 12 dozen donuts. I was staring at it, then glanced at B. These were specifically ordered, not an assorted dozen, nor were they the special 2020 box that we received as me being a grad. On top of the box was written, "Special Order." "B," I said, a quivering laugh escaping my lips. "We stole Karen's donuts." The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened almost 15 years ago when I was still living in my home country. I worked in a warehouse that served as a distribution center for a supermarket chain, a very famous one, by the way. I was an inspector in the shipping department. Basically, the sorting section would bring to the docks the goods that the store had requested, and we would prepare and load the shipment onto the truck. In the shipping department, there were assistants who did the manual work, assembling the loads on pallets, wrapping them with stretch film, and loading them onto the truck, while the inspector checked whether everything being sent to the store was correctly labeled and secure for transport. Additionally, the inspector entered all data in the internal system, sealed the truck, and printed the load summary for the administrative department to generate an invoice. Of course, inspectors also helped the assistants with the heavy lifting. Most of the time, this didn't interfere with our main responsibilities and actually sped up the process, especially since our shift, the afternoon shift, had an issue with trucks arriving late. Many times we wouldn't finish everything on time, leading to overtime and sometimes having to leave the remaining work for the night shift, which wasn't ideal since each shift had its own list of stores to attend to and this delay affected them. Each inspector worked with at least one assistant, but sometimes more, depending on their workload. Some inspectors had more stores to handle that day, some stores required extra loads or other situations that called for additional help. We had a supervisor who had been with the company for many years and had worked in the department before being promoted. The job was great and everything ran smoothly until a crisis hit another department, leaving it without a supervisor. Management decided they needed someone experienced to lead that department, so they transferred our supervisor there. In his place, they promoted someone from another department who had no leadership experience. Our department was running well, with no need for drastic changes, but our new supervisor didn't see it that way. One day, I arrived at work, and as usual at the beginning of the shift, the supervisor printed out a sheet listing the stores to be handled that day, along with which inspector was assigned to each one. So far, so good. He made some changes, but nothing too concerning. However, before we started working, he called the entire department for a quick meeting. In this meeting, he announced that he had reassigned which assistants would work with which inspectors, and showed us a printed list. To my surprise, there was no name next to mine. In other words, I was expected to work without an assistant. I protested immediately. I don't remember the exact details of the discussion, as it happened a long time ago, but basically, his idea was that as other assistants finished helping their assigned inspectors, whoever was available would come help me, something that already happened naturally, as we had a strong sense of camaraderie in our department. Plus, no one wanted to be seen by the bosses standing around doing nothing. But it wasn't enough. It would overburden me. I tried to argue my case, but I couldn't convince him. Other inspectors were also left without assistance, but they were relatively new to the company and didn't say anything, probably out of fear of losing their jobs or something similar. Well, since I couldn't change his mind, I accepted that I would be working without an assistant. I took the signs for the stores I was responsible for, found available docks for them, placed the signs on the dock gates, noted on the printed sheet which stores were at which docks, then went to the dock of the first store I would handle. I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and waited. Goods started arriving, but I didn't touch a single box. The dock filled up and I didn't move an inch. After a few hours, the supervisor walked through the department to check on things, saw the state of my dock, and asked why the load wasn't being prepared. I simply said, I don't have any assistants. How am I supposed to prepare the load? And remained standing with my arms crossed. Eventually, some assistants came to help me, and when they did, I helped them with the heavy lifting. But soon, the inspectors they were originally assigned to needed more help, and of course, they left my load behind. By the end of the shift, one load was ready to be loaded onto the truck, but another was only halfway done. I placed the paperwork with the load details in a visible spot for whoever would finish it and left. As I was leaving, my supervisor asked about the loads. Without turning around, I told him where the papers were. He asked if I wasn't going to finish them, and I didn't even respond. The next day, he called me in for a meeting. When I arrived, the manager was also there. They asked me what had happened the previous day. I replied, nothing that I remember. They brought up the incomplete loads. I explained that my shift had ended and I couldn't stay for overtime, so I left the information for whoever would finish the job, and I even told the supervisor where the papers were. Then, I took out my wallet, pulled out my time card receipt, and showed them that I had clocked out at the designated time. They mentioned that I had spent most of the shift standing with my arms crossed. I responded that I had done my job, which, as stated in my contract, consisted solely of verifying the load, supervising assembly and loading, entering data into the system, sealing the truck, and printing the load summary. Nothing beyond that. I continued by saying that anything else I might do during my shift was purely out of goodwill to help the assistants and speed up the work. But on the previous day, I had chosen to exercise my right not to perform those extra tasks because I felt unfairly treated by my supervisor who had not assigned me a dedicated assistant. That would have significantly overburdened me with tasks I wasn't paid to do. The manager simply looked at the supervisor and said, "He needs to have an assistant." Then he turned to me and asked me to leave. The two of them stayed there for quite a while. That same day, I was assigned an assistant and we never spoke of it again. Nothing like that ever happened again. The new supervisor's stint lasted only a few months before he returned to his previous role. He had put too much trust in employees he was friends with, but who weren't very competent at their jobs, and that was his downfall. Our old supervisor came back to his position, and everything improved again. The next one is an entitled people story. So, this had been a difficult time for the family mentally, even though now it is a joke that we use to tease my mom. This was around 15 years ago. We had moved to a new housing complex. This was a newly constructed space, and families had just started to move in. There was this family of 3, consisting of 22M and his parents, who moved in a few months later. It started off as a friendly neighbor vibes. I used to get along with the son and his parents, and mine used to get along. Now it turned out that the son was the only decent human being in this family. He got married and went abroad within 3 years of moving here. I guess that's enough of a backstory, and I will jump into the meat of it. All the below-mentioned events happened across a time span of 10 years. The lady in this family was the most entitled person I have seen, and she thought that my mom was here to just serve her family. I think my mom also went along, as the lady was one of the few friends that she had here. My mom is a homemaker, and so she didn't have any friends outside the housing complex. It started with she coming to our house around the time lunch was being prepared. She would start by telling how weak she is to do any household work, and she will have to go back and prepare food for her family in this weakened state. Hearing to her sobbing story, my mom used to give lunch to her. This used to happen maybe once every 2 weeks, which evolved into thrice-a-week occurrence as time went by. This then evolved into she ordering food from her home, and my mom used to take it to her home. Whenever they went to their hometown and came back, my mom used to offer food for one time, as they do not have to cook right afterwards. This voluntary offers evolved into expectations and then ordering around as well. As time went by, she used to call my mom a couple of days before they would be coming back from a travel to order food to be prepared for her family. My dad, me, and my sis, we knew what kind of human being she is, but for some reason, my mom couldn't see that aspect of her. She used to be pushed around by this lady as her personal staff. This led to many fights within us and my mom. However, things went back to how it was and never improved. My dad used to get a free bottle of whiskey every 3 months from a friend of his who was in the military. When this lady learned about this, she said to my mom to ask my dad to give her husband few whiskey bottles as well. Again, my mom thought there was nothing wrong in this ask. Now, this was not a poor family. Both son and dad in this family were earning good. In fact, at this time, only my dad was earning in our family. We used to have some difficult times, but most of the time we were comfortable with the basic needs being met. Speaking about difficult times, one time my dad was falling short for my engineering college fees. My mom suggested to ask this family for a loan. When my dad asked them, they said that he can loan the amount for a day and would need it back after that. My dad declined this, and luckily he got a temporary reprieve from a relative, which he paid back in a month. All this after everything that they took from us. The silver lining was that this event started to cure my mom's blindness towards their behavior. She also came to know from various sources that the lady was bad-mouthing my mom's cooking to everyone. She also had the audacity to do it once in front of my mom, making her feel embarrassed. This added to the recovery process. The final nail came when my mom and sis had to travel to our hometown, leaving me and my dad for a few weeks. My mom expected that the lady would return favor by giving us food. It turned out she ghosted us for the entirety of the time my mom was away. If she saw us anywhere, she would turn around, making it look like she never saw us. This cured my mom completely. Mom realized that she had been just enabling this lady and her entitlement. She confronted the lady with all these things and then set up boundaries. She never ever gave them any meal or help of any kind. The other family permanently moved to their hometown a few years back, and the last we heard, the lady and her brother got into a big fight and he barricaded the only way between their houses. Even her own family doesn't like having her around, it seems. The next one is an entitled parent story. So basically, my dad is forcing me and my twin, 23F, to give a treat to about 20 of our relatives at a restaurant. His reasoning? It's to spread joy. For context, it's been almost a year since I started working. During this time, he's dictated where I should invest my money, what I should spend on, and even insisted we buy gifts for grandparents, which we did. Me and my twin even got my dad an iPhone and bought my mom gold jewelry. Meanwhile, we've barely spent on ourselves. My one big purchase was just a pair of shoes. Now there's this family gathering, mom's side of relatives, where my dad suddenly wants me to treat 20 people. These are the same relatives he has beef with. He has this cycle where he goes overboard being generous, then gets mad when they don't return the same energy, and my mom ends up caught in the middle. He creates a really tense situation. He then gets mad at my mom's side really bad and will try to impose no contact with them to my mom and keep crapping on my mom's parents and her siblings to her, and she breaks, poor mom. The obvious solution would be to just stay civil and not overdo it, but instead he drags me into this pattern too. I refused and said it's too much for me, especially since I just started working. His response? He called me selfish, said I'm not generous like him, and claimed I only care about petty things. He's always labeled me as selfish, so it's like he was waiting for another excuse to bring that up. And this isn't new. When I got my very first salary, internship money, he wanted me to transfer everything to my mom so they could manage it better. Basically, I wasn't even given a chance to handle my own finances because they assumed I'd ruin it. The plan was, anytime I wanted to spend, I'd have to ask them for permission, and I refused it, and his response, "Oh, why are you so obsessed with money? We won't run away with your money." They didn't necessarily want to use the money, just control it. It's not like they are dependent on my money. We are well off only. And now it's the same story with this treat. If I don't do it, I'll face his passive-aggressive taunts, jokes, and guilt trips until it builds into a full-blown attack. It's exhausting. Instead of letting me learn financial independence, my dad keeps forcing me into this endless cycle of spending to please others, often people he doesn't even like. And when I resist, I'm branded the selfish, ungrateful kid. This doesn't stop here. My dad tries to control other areas of life too. Anyway, thank you for watching.